Cities are defined by their cultures. Those cultures could entail sports or business or certainly arts and entertainment. Oklahoma City is thriving in all of these areas. But who makes that all happen? This Town OKC explores the people behind the cultures, their origins, their motivations, their challenges, and their dreams. I'm Rick Allen Lippert. I've been in this town for over 50 years with a front row seat to seeing the culture grow from a dusty bus stop on the Southern Plains to a flourishing destination. Join me as we meet the folks behind the culture on This Town OKC. It is my extreme pleasure to welcome Ben Hall to my inaugural This Town OKC podcast, featuring the people behind the culture of Oklahoma City. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Rick. Happy to be here.
So, I know you as an actor, a producer, a director, a writer, a scenic designer, set builder, home remodeler. Where would you like to start with your story? How did you get here?
Well, let's make sure we include Dad and Granddad.
Dad and Granddad, of course. Yes. Especially Granddad.
Oh, especially nowadays.
Yeah. So how did you get here?
I was born back east, Ohio. We lived in Ohio, Michigan as I was growing up. And I was headed to Houston, and my car broke down. And that sounds like a line, but it is literally what happened. Broke down in Effingham, Illinois.
What year?
Oh, geez, 1980, maybe.
Okay.
80, 81, something like that. And my mother was living in Tulsa, and she was the office manager for 5 doctors in the newly opened, but not yet fully completed, City of Faith Tower on the Oral Roberts campus. And so I shipped all my stuff, put it on a bus to my grandmother's house in Missouri, and hitchhiked into Tulsa, and was sleeping on her couch waiting for my stuff to arrive and figuring out what to do. And the fair was getting ready to start. And I went down and was wandering around and saw some people putting together a Fool the Guesser booth, with a scale and all that. And I went up and talked to him, a guy named Manny and his girlfriend Teresa. And so that was my introduction to Oklahoma. Tulsa State Fair.
And showbiz.
Yeah, well, not my introduction to showbiz, but in Oklahoma, yes. And
how old were you at this point?
Well, I guess it depends on what year it was. So let's say I was 30. Okay. That's pretty close to true.
Okay, close enough.
Yeah, and so I had a green like a banker's eye shade. And they put up a mic and a PA. And,
so you were the guesser.
Oh, you bet.
They hired you to be the guesser.
Yes, sir, fool. The guesser. Step right up and beat the professor. I'll guess your age. I'll guess your weight. I'll guess the year that you were born. And if I don't get it right, you take a prize home tonight.
How long did that gig last?
Oh, whatever the fair was, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then their next spot was their last spot, and it was in Jacksonville, Florida. And I hitchhiked down there and worked that with them. And then I'd met a lady at the Tulsa State Fair, and I hitchhiked back to Tulsa and looked her up, and then we ended up starting this was before Liquor by the Drink. I talked to young folks in Oklahoma, and they don't even believe that was real.
Right.
But it was pre-'84.
Yeah.
So it was all private clubs, and we started a business with young ladies in these custom-designed, custom-built little cheerleader outfits, going in all the clubs in Tulsa, north and south side of town, 26 or 27 clubs at one point, selling long-stem roses to all the folks drinking. And got a ride up in the Tulsa world and la. And for a number of reasons, which shall remain not part of this podcast, that all kind of fell apart in a couple of years. It was a good couple of years, and I wound up in Oklahoma City, and been here ever since.
So what brought you to Oklahoma City?
It seemed like a fresher start than Tulsa. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. So seeking a fresh start in Oklahoma City, what did you do then?
You know, this isn't really part of what you're talking about, but it was kind of funny. I was just out looking for any kind of work.
Sure.
I went to Kip's. Was it Kip's Big Boy?
Yes.
Kip's Big Boy. Just because I saw a sign in the window, I was getting a hamburger.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't hire me for a bus boy because I was overqualified. I said, that doesn't make any sense. And so I actually worked for about a month for a guy who had trucks with these great pressure washer tanks on the back, and he'd go pressure wash oil field tankers that had been pulled out of the ground and were sitting in a lot somewhere in storage. And then I worked maintenance at a hotel, and
Did you have a car at this point, or were you still doing a lot of hitching?
Somewhere in there I picked up. The first car I bought in Oklahoma City was $74, and it mostly ran. It had 4 different sized tires on it, so it would kind of galumped on the highway.
I know I did a fair amount of hitchhiking in the late 70s, mid to late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah, I did a lot in the early 70s across the country, but this would have been mid 80s, and by the mid 80s. It's not something that I would advise anybody to do out on the highway.
Right.
There's just too many crazies.
Right.
And they got ideas from other people's news stories, and it just wasn't safe anymore. But yeah, I was here, and
what got you into UCO?
I just decided to go back to school, get a degree, maybe, get practical. I met Lisa. I think by then we'd already talked about school at this point, but I think I had a baby on the way, and it's just like, okay, time to get serious.
Sure, time to grow up.
Yeah, exactly. And
so you go to UCO and major in drama?
No,
oh, okay.
I went to UCO and majored in computer science with a bookkeeping minor.
Very grown up.
Absolutely. and that stuff's it's fascinating. But that doesn't mean it's not boring, because it can be both. And I wound up a couple years in, and we got separated, had a new baby, maybe a year and a half, coming up 2 years old. We separated. And the next semester I had some free hours. And I saw this course, beginning acting for non-majors. And I thought, you know what, I've always wanted to do that. Did some stuff. My mother was an actress and a writer and blah, blah, blah. Just church dramas. And I've always wanted to do that. Now, I'd be free to just play, because no pressure whatsoever.
And let's face it, it's a good place to meet chicks.
Yeah. So I took the class at UCO and got the bug, and somebody said, I think I was going, yeah, this is amazing. I thought I'd be pretty good at this. Turns out maybe I am, and that's with no training. Imagine what it'd be like if I had a little bit of training, but it's too late, and it's like, for what? Too late for what? And I don't know where I got the idea, but it was almost cemented in my brain that it was too late. So if nothing else comes out of this, I hope people hear this and say, too late for what? If you don't start today, what are you going to do with the rest of your life?
Exactly. Yeah.
What is the quote I just saw the other day? Today's the perfect day to start being the other person you wanted to be.
Very good. Yeah.
I think it's close.
Yeah.
So anyway, the next semester I dropped all that computer and bookkeeping stuff, and They didn't have an acting or theater major at the time at UCO. It's oral communications with an emphasis in theater.
Yes.
And I finished that, and then started work on a master's in. I think it was just an MA in English because they didn't have.
Right.
They didn't have. Now they've got a BFA, and they may have a graduate programs in theater. I don't know. Met some amazing people. Got to know Carvet Osterhaus really well and Kay somewhat. Greg White, who's back up there and has been there a while.
Right.
And then some folks I know now out in the community and across the country. Of course, social media, it's easier than ever to stay in touch with people, at least say hey on their birthday.
I first met you back in those days. You may not remember. I was taking some graduate writing courses, playwriting courses, and you were one of the actors who came and did some Reader's Theater.
Yeah, with John
Bishop.
Jonathan Bolt.
Jonathan Bolt, yeah.
Jonathan Bolt, Tu Culebra.
Yeah, yes. And
Yeah.
I remember seeing this one very nervous young man. I mean, visibly shaking, sitting there. It was you. It was early in your career.
Well, when I went to things like that, and that was one of the first ones, I would, hey, how are you? Yeah, well, how'd you end up here? Well, I come to this every year, or I've been doing this now for 6 years in a row. And I'm like, geez, I'm looking around at a room full of, seasoned pros.
Yeah. Those were great days. It was wonderful studying under Jonathan and John and Mylan and
Kit.
Mylan Stitt.
Mine's Kit Givens. He was up there, graduate English. Linda McDonald with her playwriting and screenwriting classes.
Yes. So you made the jump after college. I know you were very involved at UCO, and then afterwards you made the jump out into the real world.
Yeah, as real as it gets here.
Yeah. I believe you told me that you studied every book, DIY kind of book on how to do everything about home remodeling.
Well, when in the couple of years that I was first married, and we were second, but we bought a house here, and it was an older home that needed a lot of loving, and so I started. There was no such thing as online at the time.
Yes.
IBM PC was maybe a year old. I think that came out in '84.
Yeah.
And this is 86 we're talking about, probably 89. I guess it was 89.
Yeah.
So nobody I knew had a computer. There was no online. There was no Google, none of that. And so I started buying used how-to books. And, it was all that Time Life series. And it's easy to sneer at them, but they're pretty accurate. And it's how to do electrical, how to do plumbing, how to do, how to paint, is fixed drywall, it's flooring, carpet, appliance repair, on and on and on. And then as I read them, and we were fixing up the house, so I was trying all these things and, scabbling together some tools. Then I found other books that were a bit more advanced, and I probably still have the best non-governmental, actually paper library of repair and fix it and how-tos in anywhere in the region. I mean, I've got hundreds and hundreds of books. And of course, now with the internet, it's easy to find. It's easy to find wealth of information, although some of it is
suspect.
Yeah, or just complete garbage.
Right.
But yeah, so between that and then I was at UCO and looking for a job to supplement, and they had hired a new faculty scene designer and guy to run the shop there, Doug Getz.
Yes.
Getzoff.
Yeah.
And like on his second day or something, I saw the announcement, went and talked to him. he hired me. So for the next 5 years, I took what I knew about carpentry and electrical and paint and, blah, blah, blah. And he was a great teacher in the scenic world. And they're not the same, but there's lots of overlap. And so he was and I was working maintenance at the apartments where I lived all that time. So
Doug showed you how to translate real-world building experience, construction, DIY kind of stuff into theatrical
kind of
set
at least
design.
at least the tool usage, if not the same methodology. Yeah, but yeah. So and it was he was a great guy and a very talented designer and builder and teacher. And so that was a wonderful crash course.
How did you make the leap into building sets, designing sets for professional theater companies or even community theater companies?
Well, people came up and saw the stuff at, actually the first one I did, my daughter was 3.5 and I was working I was the shop foreman in the shop at UCO, and we built sets for theater, music theater, dance, and opera. So that's 8 shows a year, something like that. So it was, it was pretty thorough. And this lanky young man comes strolling in one day and says, "You build the sets. I hear you have a little girl. Would she like to be in shows?" And that was Greg White when he was still I think undergrad, maybe just graduate at that time, I forget. And he and Michelle Duncan and I forget their third partner, Lisa Carrier, I think her name was, were running a studio called On Broadway that they had bought from Mark York. And so my daughter, Alex, was in their production of Once Upon a Mattress. She was 4 by the time they did the show. And I think I built a set of stairs for them, and then did a couple things for them over the years. And they sold that to, oh boy, I just saw her on social media the other day. Anyway, Nix, Elizabeth Nix. She bought it, and I built a set for her, maybe one a year, the next several years. And by then, other people were seeing shows at UCO. I had begun to work for Shakespeare in the Park, full-time actor and building sets for them. Did some for Carpenter Square, maybe Jewel Box, some high schools. And just word got out, and I was hungry to do the work, loved doing it.
Right.
And cheap.
Well, yeah. If some of these
community no more if you're listening, not cheap anymore.
Yeah, if these community theaters were hiring you to do sets, you had to be working cheap.
Yeah. So and in the same period of time, I got to know a large percentage of the people that were in the theater community, either on stage, backstage, running theaters, directing, writing, whatever it was, in the whole central Oklahoma area that were staying here. And quite a few students that then left, but got to know the people that were staying here. And so, that's how that developed.
And acting along the way.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned being a company member at Shakespeare. What other theater companies did you perform in?
Down the road, I got connected with Don Jordan, who was running Oklahoma City, OKC Rep, city rep. And it's still Oklahoma City Rep now, but under different management. And I built sets for him for a couple of years. That was it. I started a kids theater company. I got hired to do a play, and that paid pretty well. And I took that money and rented a place and built a stage and outfitted the offices and hired a bunch of people on the phones and raised some money and we started a theater company and we put on. It was a season of shows. It was the spring after 9/11, so a bad time to get funding, and we still, just by cold calling people, raised like $25,000 or $26,000. But the idea was not to do shows for kids, but to do shows with kids. Because with my daughter growing up, and she was extraordinarily talented and got a lot of calls to come do shows. But I found that there wasn't that much out there unless you're willing to pay, $300 or $400 a semester. And those, I think there's a lot of value in the companies that were offering that to kids, but that left a lot of kids out. So I wanted to do something that I see if I could get it funded through grants and community and corporate, all together, and put the kids in the shows, not with the idea of turning them into professional actors, but just to learn the 97 other things that you can get out of being involved in theater. Just in a cast, you learn how to compromise, you learn problem solving, you learn how to follow directions, you can work on memorization, you get permission to play.
Right.
I mean, it's just the list just goes on and on and on and on. The benefits to young people being involved in performing arts, specifically in my mind, theater or musical theater. So I did that, and someone heard about it, and I got an offer to come submit a resume to direct a play at a church theater downtown, or a church that was trying to turn their little space in the basement into an ongoing working theater rather than a show now and then. And so we did a big show, sold wonderfully, a little theater. So, I mean, that's not,
Right.
wasn't thousands of seats, but we had to add performances.
As I recall, that space seats what?
99?
I was going to say about 100, yeah.
Yeah, they may have changed it, but it was 99 at the time, or 108 or something like that. Yeah. And this was before the remodel. It was a tough space to design, and with 10'6" ceilings, and it was tough.
Yeah.
But I had a ball, and I think there was 63 people all total in the first production. Oliver had a great. I double cast all the leads, so we had adults and then older teens, and lots of kids. And then that worked so well, they said, "You want to do a whole season? Let's make a season. You want to run this?" And I was there the first 3 years of that place. So that was the bridge between that and what came after. And I understand they're producing again, which is great, because there was a couple years after I left, there was a big black cloud of crap that went on there, and they had to shut down for a while. And then, of course, by then, Rhonda Clark at Carpenter Square had called me. Her guy had to leave suddenly. So, and we knew each other a long time. So I started building there. At the same time, Shakespeare in the Park had gotten a hold of me and said, "You want to come be our production manager?" And I was still building sets for Oklahoma City Rep at that point in their warehouse. So I went to Carpenter, to the board, and I said, I'll do this for what you're already paying, which wasn't much, but I get to do other stuff out of the shop. That needs to be our deal. And they said, yeah, please. And that was, 11?
I was going to say
12.
at least 10 years ago, 10, 12?
Yeah, so they got flooded in 2010. Is that right?
I
they
believe
spent
so.
a year in the hotel, is that right?
Yes.
And then they'd been in the old location, the last location, for a year. Mm-hmm. So that would have made it 2012, end of the year, something like that.
Yeah.
and that's when I started Shakespeare. So that would have been right. Yeah. So did Shakespeare for, I don't know, 3 seasons, something like that, as their production manager, and or I don't remember what the title was. Yeah, and working at building for Oklahoma City Rep and doing shows with them, and a show now and then at Carpenter, and building Carpenter sets.
And just for those listening, we are recording this in the rehearsal studio at Carpenter Square Theater, where your shop is located, here in the
new shop.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the shop we were just talking about.
Right.
That was in the last location.
Right. That was the last location. But we're at the 1009 West Reno, at the corner of Reno and Western in Oklahoma City, where we had renovated an old warehouse, and you were so instrumental in getting all of this work done. Gosh.
Well, thanks. Although it wouldn't have happened without you.
Well, somebody had to go.
Opening all those doors.
Yeah.
Bang, bang.
Yeah. Knocking after they've shut them.
But knocking.
Yeah.
But knocking and
Yeah.
knocking and knocking.
So, when did you start film acting?
I had done a little bit of stuff years ago. Let's see. It was right before I directed that play that I got paid for. So it was like January or February after 9/11. I had directed and built a set for a play, an original play for a local guy. And he owned a dance studio, and we performed it in the studio for a couple of weeks. It's a very cute little play, and he was very happy. His brother owned a dance studio in Tulsa, and one of his members, students, sponsors, I'm not exactly sure, in Tulsa was what we all kindly referred to as the oil widow. So 6 months later, we cast the show again, new cast, and took it to Tulsa and performed it for a couple of weeks in their big performing arts center, in one of the smaller theaters there. And the oil widow gave them money, and we all went out to New Mexico and shot this movie. It was the first feature film I was associated with. And Joey Travolta, John Travolta's brother, directed it.
Okay.
Ellen Travolta was in it, his sister.
Okay.
Barry Corbin, the famous Texas actor. Allison Eastwood was in it. Reginald Vell Johnson. It was just a blast. And I was mostly building and decorating sets, and I got a tiny, tiny part in the movie. And then I thought, okay, well, that was fun. And then through theater, I got connected with some local folks, Sizzlin' Brains Creative.
Oh, yeah.
And it was Michelle DeLong and Jeff Fontana.
Yes.
And they were doing production services for commercials, industrials, not really film as
Right.
such, but that kind of stuff. And I got involved in that, mostly as an actor, but sometimes to build a set. And then I got to know Brian Blagowski,
Yeah.
who was in and around Oklahoma City because he was working on the formation of the new Oklahoma Film Institute at OCCC on the tech side. And I began working with him, working on his lighting stuff, and did that a couple years with him. And then I began to get voiceover gigs, and some of that was through Michelle, but mostly it was as I knew them. I would be on the list of also calls, so I got to audition, and then I got to be known for that on my own. I got calls, and eventually got an agent. Did a couple of, I think I did a America's Most Wanted or a
Unsolved
stories
Mysteries.
of the Highway Patrol.
Yeah, I did one of those too.
Did some America's Most Wanted. There was an old photographer who I guess came up really trained in the pits during the Vietnam War, and he lived north of town, and I got to sit down with him. I think Michelle introduced it, and he said some friends of his were part of the producing team for America's Most Wanted, and they were complaining because they'd gone out to New Mexico or some union state, and had to spend $150,000 putting together this 3-minute show. And he said, I can do all of that in Oklahoma City for a third of that. Well, put up or shut up. So he called me to do, the first one we did, he had him and one more camera guy and one guy carrying around a lighting pole with two, maybe 1,200 watt HMIs on it or something. 157 setups in 2 days. And he got all but one of them.
Wow.
I mean, it was run and gun.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that phrase until then. We got the police involved and shut down Commerce Avenue and the alley just south of Commerce and on the south side of town. Had this big car chase. I did props, set dress, weapons, tattoos because we did this stuff about some gangster from South Central named Popeye, somebody who was with MS-13, which nobody in Oklahoma City ever heard of at the time.
Yeah.
Now people know who they are, but so it was pretty cool. And then we did a couple episodes more than that, and then really, a few little films here and there, independent stuff. Really, nothing was coming through Oklahoma. And then I did do a feature when the rebate got passed in that year that it was not funded, and then maybe something in the year after. And then finally it got funded. And then we were kind of getting ready to gear up. And then COVID. And one of the best things that our Republican governor did at the time, when I thought it was a very smart move, was he made, I'm not sure the name of the category, but it included anybody that worked on film, essential workers.
Yes.
And it was immediate. It was like the week that we shut down. And so film production in Oklahoma kind of got a fire lit under it. I mean, I've heard stories that Oklahoma was the busiest producing place in the nation in 2020. I can't verify that, but that's what I've heard. Because California was basically shut down.
Of course, yeah.
Atlanta was shut down.
Yeah.
New York, yeah. Dallas. Anyway, so got hired to do construction and paint on several things, and just got a new agent, started getting more and more auditions, and I've had a pretty nice run of small roles in feature films.
Yeah.
And either little roles in big movies or big roles in itty bitty movies.
Well, so let's talk about those for just a moment. I don't want to get into the weeds. You small roles in big films,
Yeah.
or in let's say in Oscar-winning films.
Okay.
In Minari, you had a great scene
Had
in
a
Minari.
nice role in Minari. Yeah.
Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yep. Had a nice little, and
I mean,
ended up.
That's not a bad resume credit.
That's not bad at all. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that I ended up in that scene with no dialogue at all, and still got listed as a principal in the show.
Oh, nice.
I tried to get them. They listed me as Sarah's murderer, and I tried to get them to change it to be Sarah's killer, so I would be one of the title characters. Killers of the Flower. Yeah.
Yeah. Did they do that?
That's a joke. No, sorry.
Oh, it's too bad.
Yeah. Had a nice little scene in Reagan
Yeah.
with Dennis Quaid and Penelope Ann Miller. And it's always nice, if you can get a scene with the big names in the
Sure.
because there's less chance it'll be cut.
Yeah, yeah.
I did shoot something in Twisters, and it got cut. But
Yeah, I know how that feels.
yeah. So yeah, and things slowed down for a while, for the year and a half after Killers came through.
But you've had a great relationship with Mickey Reese,
Yeah.
and even had pretty much the lead in, and I forgot the name of the movie. You played essentially George Jones.
Well, that was the last one that, let's see, was that right? Yeah, that was the last one that he put out. He's got one he's finishing now, but that was called Country Gold.
Yes.
Yeah, it was actually he was the lead, or maybe we were co-leads. But
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah, I mean, he wrote it for himself, but you had a substantial role.
yeah. And in his movie called Agnes, before that, and in his movie called Climate of the Hunter, before that. So yeah. And then I've got connected with another local filmmaker, Kyle Kawika Harris, and I've done a couple of things with him. And it's just, it's not a huge community, although I have noticed that I think a number of people moved here since COVID, since Oklahoma film has kind of exploded.
I think you're right. I see names associated with the film industry that I have no idea who they are.
Yeah, and people offering film acting lessons and
Sure.
stuff that is like, I don't know who you are.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
you've done some things with Ryan Belgart.
Oh yeah, that's been a blast. Yeah, he. I don't know exactly the story behind it, but he and a guy that was working with him named Chris Hoyt got hooked up with a couple of fellows that run a company called Ace Entertainment, and they started putting out these kids movies, and they were all of them had kind of the same frame, if you will. It was kids saving the day with adult support, and then some animated creature. And the first one that I was involved in was called Adventures of Jurassic Pet. And somehow or another, this guy finds a dinosaur egg and gives it to this kid who's the hero, and it hatches. And for some reason, this dinosaur is growing really fast. And of course, there's an evil scientist trying to get a hold of it, and some homeless guy with a flying go-kart trying to get him to escape. And then Ryan did several others with Ace Entertainment. Same structure, kids, and then they had one with a chimpanzee, and it was called C.I. Ape. They had one with a CGI young kangaroo, and it was called, the girl's name was Ella, so it was Joey and Ella. ARI Robot. Yeah, so they're fun little movies.
Yeah.
They just released Jurassic Pet Part 3. So yeah, they're going strong. And now Ryan's made his own, his second movie of his own that's not working for someone else. Wrote, produced, they did it all there on their LED volume wall, which is really cool.
Yes, it is. What's next? Besides building more sets for Carpenter Square Theater and other theater companies and churches and remodeling houses, I don't even want to get into the remodeling
Yeah,
houses.
that's a whole nother string.
Yeah.
It's almost a different life.
Yeah.
I'm just enjoying watching my granddaughter grow up, and you know, I'm not in the know about the film business in America or Oklahoma, but it seems as if things are picking up. I've been seeing a lot more auditions lately. The agency I'm with is going pretty strong, and I'm no longer a spring chicken, so it's a lot of it's mostly for fun, but it is fun. So there you go.
Ben Hall, thank you so much for being my inaugural guest.
Rick, I appreciate it.
This has been fun. So this
It has been.
This is This Town, OKC. I'm Rick Allen Lippert.